Welcome to the show. My name is Tuam. This show considers knowledge using a lens of political economy. What is political economy, you ask? Well, the big answer is that it is a branch of study that focuses on relationships between individuals, governments, and public policy. Then, it considers how these policies affect the nation's economy. The more simple definition of political economy considers ideas like the distribution of wealth, ownership of property, and issues of supply and demand. It essentially looks at all matters of development while keeping a keen eye on the politics of the day. For us to understand economic impact, therefore, it is necessary to apply rigorous analysis to information from the right source. Indeed, knowledge is only as powerful as its source. So, with that in mind, welcome to The Source.
Kevin, great to see you on another episode of The Source.
Thanks.
We are having a discussion on whether the military is now the new catalyst of innovation, technology, and agro-processing in Kenya.
Right.
Kenya is now manufacturing military hardware drones, identification systems, geospatial technology, you name it.
Yeah.
But before we go there, let's first start talking about the silent manufacturing revolution Kenya is experiencing in the production of masks and PPEs. Kenya is now one of the largest producers of surgical masks and PPEs in Africa, if not the world.
Right. Hey, Lynn, great to have you. Great question. It's called the power of adaptation. Who would have thought that for every 18 masks produced globally, Kenya produces one mask? Yes, it is true. Kenya has become a big manufacturing hub for masks and PPEs globally. In fact, two companies are responsible for this feat. The first one is Hela Clothing Limited. When the COVID pandemic hit Kenya, this EPZ company was making apparel for the export market. When lockdowns and flight restrictions were imposed, demand of apparel fell, and Hela workers stared at job losses. The company swiftly switched to the production of PPEs and face masks. By rejecting paralysis and embracing innovation, this company saved over 300 workers from joblessness. At the time, I think Hela Clothing Limited was making this transition from apparel to masks. The World Health Organization announced there was a monthly deficit of 89 million masks globally to fight COVID. Now, what happened was Hela swiftly produced 10 million masks in the months of April and May last year, and this is how they were able to manufacture 1 out of 18 masks globally to close the WHO deficit. Eileen, the second example is Bedi Investments, a Kenyan apparel company based out of Nakuru. When the COVID pandemic hit, Bedi Investments retooled its productive capacity due to a fall in clothing demand from the West. Over 800 workers stared at unemployment due to falling demand from the West. By July last year, Bedi began producing PPEs and masks. Their production capacity of PPEs shot with speed to 10,000 PPEs daily. Instead of firing its 800 workers, Bedi actually hired another 300 workers to cope with the heavy demand, and not just from Kenya, but from Uganda as well. Now, today, Bedi is responsible for the manufacturing of 80% of all PPEs in Kenya and over 70% of all PPEs in Uganda.
Wow, what an incredible story, Kevin.
Yeah.
Now let's go back to Kenya's military innovation and manufacturing story.
Okay.
The Kenyan military has ventured into innovation, tech agro-processing, vehicle assembly, and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think Kenya's military is the catalyst for her innovation needs?
Yes, I do, Eileen. And there's a theoretical framework behind the military being the manufacturing catalyst. It revolves around the theory of why war economies are better than peacetime economies. And this by an Austrian economist. His name is Otto Neurath. And this is because war economies display advantages of speed of decision and execution, optimal distribution of means similar to those of military institutions. Peacetime economies focus on mass production for profit and then focus on speed of execution and optimal distribution much later. And this is because war economies are centrally planned. Peace economies are decentralized. They rely on rational expectations and forces of supply and demand. And the question Neurath was inviting us to answer when he said this is, if you want manufacturing to be successful, why leave it to markets? Why don't you centralize? Why don't you centralize it in efficient organizations like the military? And once you find a viable and efficient way to manufacture, then expand the number of people that can do it. And I want to give you 3 examples, Eileen, here. The GPRS mapping technology we use on our phones, who created it? It was the Pentagon. It was the US military. We now use it on Google Maps and other mapping applications. Who created the Sputnik vaccine? It was the Russian military. By 2021, by the way, there will be nearly 1 billion doses exported to 60 countries across the world, and that's Sputnik. In Israel, the tech industry value is over $100 billion. That's Kenya's GDP. The agriculture technology, which was developed by former soldiers, is what makes them the world's top orange and lemon exporters. And yet, Israel only has about 250,000 hectares of arable land. The point is simple. Innovations we are all using to do more efficiently have been made by military people.
So you're telling us that we shouldn't rely on private sector to spur manufacturing? We should rely on the military?
Oh, Eileen, yes, absolutely. And I have 3 reasons why. One is private sector has reached its ceiling in Kenya. And that's because if you do the math, manufacturing in Kenya contributes a paltry 6% of GDP. That's about what, $6 billion or 600 billion Kenya shillings. Most of the products we have produced in the last 20 years or so are the same. They are the consumables, your Omo, your everyday toothpaste, your cooking oil, the alcohol, the beer, and some textiles. This means that the value-added products haven't changed much. In short, private sector has not expanded its scope to create a bigger, better modern products. We don't manufacture electronics. We don't innovate systems. We simply import tech from China, India, Japan, the UK, and the US. And if we are to move into big manufacturing targeted and with targeted focus, with focus, some targeted focus must happen, and that focus cannot be private sector led. It has to be led by regimented organizations like the military. Private sector is short-termist, it's profit-oriented, and it's too impatient. The second thing, Eileen, is the demand has to be initiated by the state. And here is why. President Kenyatta the other day launched Kenya's first digital land management system. Who do you think did it? It was the disciplined forces. No one in the private sector ever developed a system that made it possible to transact land before, at least digitally. In 58 years, Eileen, Kenya's land system was manual. Land transactions had like 8 processes and took about 4 to 5 months to conduct at the minimum. Now you can transact land from your phone. Another example is outright swindling. Would you fathom the Kenya government used to buy a single map sheet at 150 million shillings? A single map. Can you imagine buying a single map for $1.5 million? But when the military was contracted to do it, to map the whole country, a single map sheet costed 70,000 shillings, But thirdly and lastly here, Eileen, is the military provide more value for money. I can tell you, military spending is about $1.2 billion every year. Just a fraction of that amount has gone into high impact innovations, the making of guns, the making of drones, and even rebuilding of agro-processing industries like the Kenya Meat Commission. I'll give you the last example. Before the military took over the Kenya Milk Commission, KMC, KMC used to slaughter 7 cows a day. 7. Now, you know how many they do every day? 200 cows a day. And that's after the military took over. And they pay their clients 72 hours after delivery, not the 6 months it used to take. Oh, and by the way, KMC was taken over by the military, or when they were taken over, they had a debt of 250 million shillings. 2 months later, after the military took over, the 200 million shilling debt had been paid off. What does that tell you? Why have we been wasting time with private sector and funding ministries? The military is our way to prosperity, at least clearly.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome.